Like to call to order the Personnel Committee meeting of July 15th, 2024 at 4:30 p.m. Like to do roll call. Kimberly Higginbotham,
Here.
Tracy Pollock,
Here.
and myself, Eric Brown. I am present. We have agenda revisions and approval. Do we have any agenda revisions or approval?
Move to approve the agenda.
I will second.
First by Tracy, second by Kim. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I hear no opposed, so that motion carries. And we will approve the minutes from the June 10th.
Make a motion to approve the June 10th, 2024 meeting minutes.
Second.
First by Kim, second by Tracy. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, didn't hear any, so that motion carries. We move right to reports and updates. The first item is A, teacher contracts. And this does not come with any recommendations needed, and we will let Mr. Mike Nowak take it from here.
Thank you. And that's exactly where I was going to start. There are no recommendations needed at this point. Our process has been to include contracts as part of this meeting for informational purposes, and then to include this along with resignations and consent agenda at the board meeting. We have a number of contracts, I believe there were 12 in full, that we bring forward. Without going through each one, it's a variety of regular contracts and part-time contracts. One in particular that I thought today I should point out is Vicki Umhafer, an occupational therapist. It's a part-time contract, and Vicki is actually a current employee of ours. This is a contract that results from a change in work group. Over the last several years, she's been part of our professional technical group. Prior to that, she was a contracted employee. We made the move, I think it was probably about 4 years ago, maybe more, maybe 5 years ago, that she would become one of our employees, as she truly wasn't a contracted service. She was somebody that worked with us exclusively. So there's that move to bring her on. We put her in the professional technical spot, and after some discussion, we felt it appropriate to move her into the teacher classification. There's no financial change here. It's just she goes on to a teacher contract, which she was appreciative of. She kind of, as we talked through it, thought that, that was where we would have gone earlier on. But we've transitioned her and created a contract for her it's the prorated amount based on where she was. So, in addition, some of these that we see are, they're in response to resignations that we've had. In one case, it's the result of staffing needs in terms of increased staffing at the elementary level. In one case, our family consumer science teacher at the high school is the result of a retirement in which 2 part-time teachers were evolved into 1 full-time position. So that's what we did. Any
Great.
questions as you look through those?
I think
Recognize
the
Mike.
question was just answered for our folks at home. Caitlin Hedgewald, Germantown High School FCS teacher.
I thought I couldn't fit it in. I couldn't fit it in the family and consumer
Yeah,
science.
Okay. I mean, I know what it is, but
Okay.
of course our viewers at home don't.
We appreciate that, Mike.
Community service.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? We will move on to item B, also covered by Mr. Mike Nowak. That's teacher resignations. Again, no recommendation is required with this.
Thank you. We have 3 resignations that we're bringing forward. 2 of them are prior to the June 15th date, which statutorily is when contracts need to be returned. Anything after that, per our contract, is subject to liquidated damages. So 2 of the resignations that we see would not be subject to liquidated damages. The other one, Kelly Korick, was submitted on July 8th. That would be subject to liquidated damages. I've been in contact with her. We are in the process of securing that. I have not at this point done so. So she is moving into a teaching position with another district, which quite honestly we've been aware of. It's in the hometown that she lives in. We will be in contact with them relative to their process of bringing her into a contract. By law, you can't be in 2 contracts at the same time. Sometimes we'll get contracts that require someone being released from theirs. It's a process that districts go through regularly.
Any questions regarding resignations? All right, we'll move to item C, staffing update.
This is a process that you've seen over the last year. The particular framing of it at this time, much like it was the last time we did it, which I think was early June, spoke specifically to teachers, and then you'll see the chart that's provided gets deeper into our aid positions and such. I did that because this is a time of year when, for all kinds of reasons, the teacher hire process heats up quite a bit for all districts, and being able to lay it out the way I did, I think becomes a little more clear for people. So we still are interviewing for an assistant principal at the high school. It's a process that we've continue to look at, and Dr. Reuter can maybe speak to that at some point. From a math, or from a teaching perspective, at GHS, we're now looking for a math teacher based on that very recent resignation, a science teacher and a Spanish teacher. I'm confident that those positions should be secured possibly by the end of this week. At least 2 of the 3 will. We also are looking for a speech and language pathologist that would represent the district. Amy Bell has 2 positions, a kindergarten teacher, which actually just got filled post the publication of this document. That will go to the board. There's also an elementary music, part-time elementary music candidate that we're in the process of trying to solidify a contract and finalize that. That would be a very big hire for us. MacArthur Elementary is still looking for a 3rd grade teacher. Kennedy, there's a special education teacher that is coming in tomorrow to discuss a contract. And again, post the publication of this document, we had a technical education teacher fill a position at Kennedy. We still are short 1. So of 2 tech ed positions at Kennedy, we have 1 filled, and we're working to fill the other. On the aid side, on the next page, we have for some time have been looking for special education aides. We continue to do so. Trying to just think. The others, there's a district office position in there that we're looking at based on a recent resignation. The others I'd be happy to speak to, but they're fairly straightforward, if you will.
Yep. Anybody have any questions on what they see there?
So,
Go ahead.
How about the tech ed teacher? If we're short come the start of the school year, what happens? Can they go ahead with it, or substitutes, or?
If we'll continue. It's very early. I mean, we're at the halfway point. We've been in positions where we've gone much further with the need to hire. One of the things we do in these situations is obviously recruit teachers, but in this case, DPI has created a process for us to employ people through experience-based licensure, which this board has had experience with a few positions. We could explore that. There's been a candidate who's expressed interest. We will work right up to the start of school and into the start of school seeking candidates. That's the case. I feel pretty good about the candidate, the fact that we have one of the two candidates, which leaves me optimistic that we're going to find a candidate.
And we had someone for the second position that's vacant, but decided not to relocate to this region, they're more north. And they had gone through the process of interview with an offer, but decided to not relocate at this time. So we're hopeful that we will have more applicants, but to your question, Mr. Loth, if need be, we will have to fill that with substitute to start the year versus
Okay.
cutting programming.
Okay, good.
Which we're able to do. A substitute teacher can serve in a role for a period of up to 45 days without that specific license. We would seek probably, if it would come to that, we would seek recommendations from other districts around teachers that they've worked with in the past that may be willing to fill in. It's something we're very, very used to. As central office, district office administrators and building principals, it's something we just have to remain confident and know that a candidate will rise to the surface. They always seem to, so we're optimistic.
Okay.
Ms.
Very good.
Higginbotham, you had a question. Was it pertaining to that or
No.
something different? And I'm gonna add one on and then come back to you.
Okay.
So if we don't have, and I understand that we're optimistic, that we're gonna get someone in there, we have substitutes. If we don't have and we have to go the substitute route, and this will go maybe to the teacher on call conversation we're gonna have. Because it's so specialized, is that a role that a teacher on call would be able to fill in?
So,
Are we comfortable because it's in a specific area?
right, what we do with teachers on call in these situations is and it's happened outside of tech ed, we let them know the specific position that we're looking for, their database and
Then they'll
their
match it up with somebody
resources.
that's-
I could tell you with confidence, they would say that's gonna be hard to find,
Right.
but they would try to assist in that way.
They may have preferred candidates based on people who's picked that position to substitute in, than that we would go after for the interim till we solidified
Okay.
a highly qualified individual.
So later in the evening, we're gonna talk a little bit about teachers on call and assignments. Would that be something that we would contact teachers on call outside an individual that's assigned to the school because they're not specific in that area? Okay.
Possibly.
Yeah, we likely, and we've done this
So
before.
there's several contingent plans for
Right.
specific,
When we have these kind of high need areas or, hard to fill positions, we'll work with TOC. Simultaneous to that, we'll work on our own through WeCan.
got it.
As well as then, if we do have someone in there in a substitute role, Jake and his department and building administration work with the department team to help that substitute with lesson plans and expectations of that coursework.
Got it. Mike, you comfortable with that?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Maybe bring in a guest speaker.
Maybe Mike can.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Were you volunteering your time for
I
that?
don't-
Fill a day.
Yeah, I'd love to come in and
Maybe
just.
we-
Well, well,
actually,
I'd have to ask them
anyone.
that.
So we'll keep you up to date on this and as we progress with any potential candidates as well.
Great. And then Ms. Higginbotham, did you have a question?
So I don't know if I'm jumping the gun on this, but,
We'll let you know.
okay, I'm sure. This resignation data, we haven't really talked about it normally, we kinda just look
Yeah.
and see what's there. But now that we're at the end of a school year, are we going to kinda put a compilation of what we have this year? And then, kinda keep track and see where we're doing year to year to see how we're doing as far as attracting, retaining teachers that are, that like the district, why people are leaving, just so we can kinda start a year to year analysis
Yeah.
of how we're doing.
Yeah, and we're willing to do whatever, the board is interested in having we, in September, have created a teacher retention report, which sort of like the data that you're referencing, we've included, beyond retirement and termination, we've included data on number of teachers that have left, the reasons that they've left. So we have a kind of a picture in that regard, and that's been, you've seen this. You just, it's, you know,
Right.
it's done in a year-to-year manner. The important piece of that for us is that the HR directors group in the metro area, it's called SPAM, School Personnel Administrators of Metro Milwaukee, I believe. Sorry. We collectively, at the end of summer, create that data. A Google survey goes out and we fill in the chart, so we have kind of a picture of where we're at relative to other districts. We can do that right now, but we're sort of at this interesting point where, and Eric and I were talking about this prior to the meeting just a little bit. At the midway point, really at that June 15th point, we see people who haven't signed their contracts, right? And we bring them to you for release because it's what we should do. But that's sort of one point in time for the summer. Then there's this sort of next wave of things that occur, and even in the last 10 business days, we've seen teachers who are recruited by other districts, who resign, you know, so on and so forth. Part of that is that end of summer data gives us a better picture of that part of it. And I can say, you know, every district goes through that. I mean, it sounds like a canned response, but we talk about it quite a bit. Every district in the area, probably in the state, but for sure in the area, goes through turnover. It's sort of, you know, in this day and age, it's really, in some regards, what schools have been programmed to do, and teachers too, relative to exploring the market. If there are positions that I won't name a district, but a neighboring district has an opening and they know there might be a teacher in said district, you know, they'll recruit, they'll get word out, hey, would you be interested in coming here? We may be able to compensate you more. I just think about it, this is, the HR director role in the summer is very, very different than it is during the school year, and the vast majority of it is these kinds of things. You're smiling because you know what I'm talking about. And that's what we do. It's a constant process of working with candidates coming in for positions, exploring calls with teachers who expressed interest about possibly leaving, conversations about compensation, all those kinds of things. Dr. Reuter and I have had many
I think
conversations.
that your question, Ms. Higginbotham, will be, the answers to it will be somewhat enlightening with what Mr. Knox talking about with this report and seeing some comparables. I read a lot of other district board agendas and packets just to know what's going on, and when you read, I read 2 this morning from very close by districts, and you read their personnel packets where they're having similar committees tonight, their lists are 3 people like ours or some 10, right? So I think the narrative of retention overall, and I shared with the board, I believe, in the beginning of the year, and we can put this in the 20th, or the September packet for personnel, the statewide research study related to teacher retention, and it's an all-time high across the state that it's at an 80% retention rate because of factors of, there are free agency now, post-Act 10, that we just had a conversation today regarding one of our teachers who a neighboring district is recruiting heavily, and we know that, and we're gonna have to talk that. You as a board are aware of that with some of the actions you've made to retain people that have gotten offers from other school districts. So I think it's not to make an excuse that we are, I never like when I look at our personnel packet, and we have people leaving. But we are making efforts to keep them, as well as understanding the comparables across the state and this region. It's not a Germantown issue, it's a public education issue when it comes to workforce. Just like it's hard to fill many of these positions because they're very unique, and as we know, every undergraduate program across the state and the country, less people are going into the profession. So we have to make this a place that people want to stay, but also value it when there are other offers on the table. We know they're a quality employee.
Well, I think that's an important point to bring forward to the district, is saying that this is typical to see, about this many teachers, resigning or leaving, terminations, whatever, so that it doesn't look like, wow, they're just, bleeding employees. It's not necessarily, it's just that's kind of the nature of the beast with the industry. And even actually, across industries, everybody kind of has issues with employees leaving or only staying for a short little bit. So just so that it's not as shocking when you see, obviously we don't want these resignations, we don't want, and moving forward, having the opportunity to fill these positions, finding employees and teachers that want to stay in this district is what's important. So kind of being able to compare that year to year would be important to show how we're accomplishing that.
And I'll bring that up as a discussion point. I hear what you guys are saying, is any data that comes out before really September 15th, it's ebb and flows and it's gonna be changing. Is there any value, do we see any value as a board to say, teacher contracts have to be signed by the 15th? To take a look at just the raw data, to see how many of our teachers are truly committed and said, yep, we're coming back. Any feelings on that? Is that a lot of
Well,
data to mine, or is it something
No,
that
that
you
would
actually
be, I mean,
have?
we know when we have
Yeah.
2 or 3 that don't sign their contract because they're pursuing other positions or have left the field. That's something we could do in a June personnel committee, as long as it's post the 15th of 95% of teachers sign their contract at this given point, but there are, as you know,
Yeah.
Right.
then
You-
And that's kind of what I'm interested in seeing, is if that ebbs and flows over the years.
Sure.
If we're doing something right, that all of a sudden that number starts dropping.
yeah.
It says we're on the right track,
You-
and then it lightens your workload towards,
Yeah,
this.
I mean, you technically have seen,
Yep,
you've seen those contracts.
Yep.
Because they come forward as resignations.
and I see them, and that's why I'm interested in now quantifying them.
Right,
And
right,
saying, I've seen
Which
them,
would be a simple
how's this
piece
stack
of
up,
this
and how's it
reporting.
stack up for the previous years?
right.
Lets us
And
know we're on the right
districts, with the June 15th piece of it, not all districts, and we haven't some years ago, we haven't necessarily brought those because the contract sunsets, and in some ways, the mindset is, well, it's over. But it's important that we bring it, because technically, if a teacher isn't non-renewed, they have a right to the position.
Right.
So bringing it to this group as a resignation is important to do. It's a technicality,
Yep.
but we don't want someone not signing and
Laying
then
low and then come back saying,
July
"You gotta get
20th
it."
saying, okay, well, I'm gonna come back.
Yeah.
And we filled that, and now we have to
Right.
Right.
terminate a position.
That's something that's been explored in the courts. We've
Yep.
talked about it a lot, and bringing it as in those resignations is important. That's why these reflect that a little different reasons, but the June piece had a number of them too, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
That's something we can do moving forward, Eric.
Okay. So staffing update, any questions? No actions are required, so we'll move on to item 6, unfinished business, of which I do not believe we have any. So we'll move right on to item 7, new business. Item A, employee handbooks. And again, Mr. Nowak will take that.
Thank you. So, this is the time of year when we bring forward our handbooks for, call it start of year approval. We've done this in different ways. I think this is the cleanest way, I'm not on the right page, it's the cleanest way to do it. To say our handbooks have been updated and we're seeking your approval. Now, this is employee handbooks, so it's main section for employees, which that encapsulates anything that applies to everyone. And then it's the subsections, work groups, teachers, administrators, professional, technical, and support staff. Without going into great detail, all the changes that have occurred, you know that we've brought handbook changes to personnel and to the board over the course of the year. Those changes, modifications have been made, and the handbooks now reflect what we want them to. Now, that said, I've said this at this meeting at this time of year, the handbook is not a point in time at the beginning of a year that you're stuck with for the whole year. We have the ability to modify at any point through personnel and the board, and we would do that. But that said, it's important that we, through this process, adopt them at this point in time for the 24-25 school year.
So these are living documents, but everything that's in them at this point, we have discussed and passed, and it's all
There's
up
no
to date,
edits
so we're
this
just.
evening. Yeah,
What's
there's
that?
no edits this evening.
Yep, so we're just tonight saying, you guys had final approval to look through it, make sure everything was in there, and
I went back and I kind of tried to find all of those changes throughout, and I didn't see anything that was missed in the document presented to us.
good. Any questions or comments? Are we gonna just say for all the employee handbooks, we're
Yeah.
gonna move on?
Yes.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions regarding any of the employee handbooks that we have in front of us tonight?
I
I
guess
have
we
one.
just need to stress that it's the employee handbooks, it's not student handbooks, it's
Right.
not co-curricular.
Which those have already been approved.
I was gonna say, we've already done those, so. I did have a question, regarding the main employee handbook, and when you go into, the weekend section. I don't know if we should discuss this now or maybe another time, but I did notice all of our open positions, we have, until filled. There's two options we can do there. We can do until filled or put a close date on it.
Yeah.
Do we
Yeah.
choose as a district to say until filled versus close date, or is that up to the hiring person? How do you handle that?
We ultimately would make that decision. It doesn't necessarily relate to handbooks, but I'm happy.
I just
talk
saw it
to
in there, that's why I said
Yeah,
we can.
yeah, and you and I have had this conversation, remember, a couple
Yep.
months back. Quite often, we do that because of the nature of the position, and, we know, and especially when positions are hard to fill, there's logic to saying until filled, so we don't lose candidates relative to deadlines and those kinds of things. But we have done it, and I would say the place where, what immediately comes to mind is like administrator positions. We typically would put those out with a very firm close date. It's something that, I don't know, I don't think we've discussed too much, but in some ways it speaks to our concern about applicant pool and not wanting to lose somebody because they missed a deadline.
And are we on the board familiar with until filled versus putting a close date on there? So, if you want, I'll take a shot at explaining it, you can correct me, or if you
Sure.
wanna do it. So if we say until filled, my understanding would be, as applicants come in, we take a look and we screen them, and it's up to the hiring individuals to reach out to them and say, got it, don't have it, and
Right.
have discussions or not. If we say close date, we say, we're hiring for this position with a close date of July 15th. That means people will submit their information, and you will not hear back until July 15th or shortly after. So it's really expectation setting for people looking for employment. If we say until filled, my concern is, in this day and age of immediate responses, I know people that until filled, they send it out, and an hour later, they get a computer generated, sorry, you're not a match. So the expectations these days are, did you get it? Are you gonna follow up on it and that? So do we have policy around that, or?
I could say that with close date, that doesn't mean you won't hear until after the close date. If there's a candidate that's highly qualified there might be a phone call or an initial conversation.
Can you do that if you post a
sure.
close date and
So
say?
that at the end of the day is just a technicality from an internal management. Do we want to keep this until filled? Because when you log into WeCan as a prospective employee, the most recent posting for said position rises to the top. So you're always scrolling through to see the names of the districts versus maybe the name of the position. Or you can search as a candidate based on district or name of position. Until filled leaves you, to Mike's point, the opportunity to build, if it's a hard to fill position, to build a bigger pool. Now, when you have positions like a elementary principal, you have a very tight close date because you're trying to fill with a smaller candidate pool than you might be for a fourth grade teacher or a FIAD teacher or a position that has a higher fill pool. So I don't know that there's a right or wrong way to do it. It's often based on what the position is that you're trying to fill, and if you have a quick timeline. So if we do a close date, it might be for a long-term sub or something, we gotta get people to apply because we gotta get a
them
faster
all in there.
process going than
Yeah.
something we're trying to hire for that starts September 1.
The other scenario which comes to mind for me, which is definitely real, is when we have a position and we interview for it and a candidate is forwarded to human resources, it puts in motion a conversation on our end with the candidate about the position, about a potential contract. We're not done at that point. And in this day and age, we're really not done because that same candidate might have offers from 1, 2 other districts. So sometimes you get, 3, 4, 5 days beyond that recommendation, and the candidate takes another position, and you're back to square one.
So if it's until fill, you don't start a new pool
Yeah.
where everyone
just
starts to
continue.
reapply again, and
Yeah.
now you gotta go, wait, did that person apply last time or not? Because on a close date,
Yeah.
it shuts that application down, and then you create the same one again because the person bowed out at the last second. Now you've got all those same people applying, and sometimes make for double work.
And
Right, but then you do that if you're confident you're gonna fill the position.
Sure.
I guess I would.
Like that's why Mike said, like an administrator position where you have less people applying. But
Right.
there are times I have also in our administrator pools, because there was a close date, not as many were filtering in, you reopen it, so it bumps to the top of WeCan, and you extend the close date, or you say until filled, to try to fill
Right.
that in.
Who ultimately makes that decision of doing until filled or close date?
I mean,
HR, I mean, the hiring manager might recommend, but.
Okay, I keep an eye on Weekend, and I'm always on ours, and most
Do you
of
have
ours.
a tech ed license?
Can you get one?
You should see my garage.
So, It's something
that's
we'll
always-
talk with our hiring team too about what's the purpose of why you're recommending until fill or a close date, given the positions. Like the tech ed position is until fill,
Right,
Because
because
they-
that's gonna be hard to,
correct?
yep,
right.
I get that. I only saw a couple with a close date on our site over the last 6 months. I kinda looked at it and went, well, that's interesting. So I
Sure.
didn't know if we had a process in place that, or if it's just up to.
I think part of, we're open to anything with this. I don't think we have real, the explanation we're given is real based on our experiences, but it makes sense. I think the other piece, which I think you alluded to, was about process for when we do secure a candidate and communicating with those who haven't been selected, and kind of how that works. And that's one that I guess I would just say certain principals are more diligent about how that communication goes out. It's something on our end that we can work with them on.
And maybe for the sake, I'm sorry, Mr. Pollock, maybe for the sake of this agenda item, because it's kind of strained from employee
Yeah.
handbook,
Right.
that could be next month's personnel committee, a report, an update on hiring process.
Yep, that's what I'm thinking, is maybe getting it out on the next agenda, because the other side that we don't see, somebody applies, they don't hear back, they go, it kind of reflects on
Right.
us as a district.
Exactly.
I'd
So-
say it's common in public education.
It's
When
common.
you
And
don't,
and it is, and
It's-
that's
I-
coming from the private world is, man, you don't do that.
Well, the proper
But-
and professional thing to do is communicate as soon as you know, is
Right.
how I look at it. I've been in my position for just about a year, and just about a week ago, I finally got sorry, we filled the position. on something that I had applied to probably a year and a half ago. I didn't even remember.
So, I mean,
So that's, that
what's
to
the
me,
mindset
that's-
you have of that other group?
I'm not ever gonna work for them, or even bother.
And that's a narrative we wanna stay
Yeah,
away
and
from. We don't
that's,
want that
that's
happening.
way, for me, that's way more important than the fill, or
Yeah.
open
Yeah.
for filled
Yeah.
versus.
Yeah, but one leads to the other. If you say open to filled and then you let it hang out there for a year, that's where that comes from.
Oh.
Whereas if it's closed, you go, I didn't get the call, I know I'm out.
If I was running something, I would just, if I knew that the candidate was not qualified, I'd send something out immediately.
Yeah. I agree. Any other questions on employee handbooks? No? We will move to building substitute.
No, we won't. I'd like to
Yeah.
make a motion to
Right.
move forward with a positive recommendation to the full board to approve the modification to all of the employee handbooks as presented.
I will second, he was waiting for us.
I know he was. So we have a first and a second. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We don't have no opposed, so we will move right on. That motion carries that we will approve the employee handbooks. Now we will move to new business item B.
Mr. Brown, can I have the floor for a second?
Building substitutes? Sure, Tracy?
Just for full transparency, during this discussion, I will be, part of the discussion, I will not be voting. I'll abstain on any motions, move forward because my wife currently works for Teachers on Call and has served as a building substitute in the past.
That is acknowledged and accepted. Appreciate that. With that, Mr. Nowak?
Okay, thank you. So, building substitutes as a topic that was before this group, I think about 12 months ago. We talked about incorporating building subs into sort of our work with Teachers on Call. Quick explanation, a building substitute is a substitute that works specifically at a given site, or in our case, with our elementary schools, they worked at 2 sites. That was our initial step, and on the commitment side and the financial side, the daily rate that substitute receives is $160 a day versus $125 for our day-to-day subs. The commitment for the teachers for this building substitute is that they're in that building or buildings every day, and there's an expectation that they're working every day. What it offers us is security of a known sort of go-to sub that we can access. We began the year with the hopes of filling 4 of those positions, 1 at the high school, 1 at the middle school, 1 shared between MacArthur and County Line, 1 shared between Amy Bell and Rockfield. Throughout the year, at various points, we had people in positions. I'll use, for example, at the high school, at Kennedy. In both those cases, it was positions that they got later in the year. And one of them, the building substitute, then went on to a long-term role. So that from our perspective was good because it was a candidate that we got to see, got to know, and then used, were able to capitalize on the resource and use them. When we talked about this last year, we talked about the budgetary reality of this. When you pay a sub at $160 a day, there's more that goes into it, to the tune of a little over $6,000 a year commitment. The challenge that we see or saw with having a building substitute between 2 sites, as you can imagine, is the coordination between the 2 sites that needs to occur, assistants, office assistants on the phone asking who's available, who isn't, where are we at, whereas the building sub this week, those kinds of things. There is, you know, and some of this is really anecdotal relative to talking to buildings about the value of a building substitute. They all said that it's a huge value to us. In the event that someone isn't assigned, they've got the security. If someone maybe needs a sub for a part of the day, or, you know, there's an emergency situation, you know, that building sub can be accessed. It's been helpful. Our perspective right now is it's appropriate to proceed with trying to fill building sub positions at all the sites. You know, that said, this used to be common practice in schools, and it was a very regular thing, especially for less experienced teachers, as a way to kind of break into a school, or, you know, get their foot in the door, get people to know them. The candidate pool is not as expansive as it once was, so we don't see people applying for building sub positions in that way, quite the same way. Our substitutes typically like the flexibility of subbing. They like to be able to adjust their schedule at given points in the year. We understand that. We still see value in trying to fill those positions at every school if we can. So we're seeking 2 more building subs. That would mean 1 at each of our elementary schools, 1 at Kennedy, 1 at the high school. And, you know, the financial piece to that is an additional probably $12,000, which, relative to the efficiency that position provides, we feel is definitely worth it.
When you say an additional $12,000, did you look back at times that we had to still use another sub from teacher on call? Because at the elementary schools, they were sharing. So the situation where both elementary schools actually needed an additional one, and what that
It's a
costs?
Good question. I'm basing that on the difference in daily rate of 125 to
Okay, so
160.
it really doesn't take into that situation that could
Well,
possibly even be more.
And likewise, it doesn't take into account, and we talked about it the last time we talked about building subs, but quite often at the middle and high school level, our teachers are filling in. Which, if you do the math on that, it's probably a wash. That there's still probably that extra $35 a day that the building sub offers,
Okay.
for what it's worth.
Then if we went to a teacher at every school, right now the elementary schools are sharing them. If we have a situation where one of the elementary schools needs 2 substitutes, can we pull one from the other
Yep.
elementary school and bring them over? So when it says within the district's buildings, it's not building specific per se, it just means
They
within
might
the district.
decline it.
We can
but
move them
yes,
around and
Yes, if need be. If
call
there's-
Amy Bell and say, we
if
actually need you at
There's a
Rockfield
major sickness
today.
at Rockfield and we
So
have
that would
multiple
prevent us from
teachers
having
out,
to have
that
a-
might be
a
for
teacher fill in.
short-term fix.
Right.
Yes.
That sounds like a great idea.
Likewise, it means the middle and high school as well. If, you know, in the morning, there's communication that we know a sub is needed at Kennedy for whatever reason, we can get them up there. I think this year was, at various points in time, we had building subs that we beyond the shared position at County Line and Mac, our buildings were able to have success and feel good about the people in those roles. But we just think we have to continue to move in that direction. TOC advocates for it. They feel strongly it's an appropriate way to bolster your sub pool and fill rates and those kinds of things. That's all taken into account, but at the end of the day, it's a decision we have to make as it being something that we truly believe in, you know, being a benefit to us.
And we also talked, I'm sorry, Ken,
Go
I'll
ahead.
make a quick comment here. We've also talked in the past that teachers on call is okay with if one of these substitute teachers really fits in well. They don't have a problem with us talking to them about filling a full-time position with us, or
Yeah, there's some contractual pieces to that. We've never had this discussion here,
Oh.
but there's actually, it's language that's referred to as poaching.
Right.
So they're technically TOC employees, and if we take them, it's deemed poaching. Now, that said, if it's somebody that's, depending on how long they've been with us, that fee changes. And I think I've never experienced this, but I think there's language as well around like ends of school years and beginning of the next year in terms of leaving employment with TOC and going in. So there is stuff that we have to consider there. That's what we experience with all
Okay.
districts.
If
for
it
what-
happens, we'll look at that.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Ms. Higginbotham, did you have a question?
So a couple questions. First, was there ever a time that any of these building subs were not used in the day? Or did we use them?
That
pretty much every
does
day?
happen, and when that happens, they're on standby. I would say that's pretty rare, but they may then, okay, we need you for a few hours in a particular area for an aide that's out or something like that.
Are they
Um,
required to stay in the school?
yes.
They have to stay here for the full school day regardless of if we use them in a
Correct.
classroom or not?
As you can see in the data from that Mike attached from TOC, and he mentions in his report, our absenteeism rate for support staff
Saw
and
that.
teachers were up 60% this
Mhm.
year. However, our fill rate was higher, so people are filling those positions, whether it be our building sub or other, usual substitutes. So I think
Mhm.
it's very rare in a school day during the 172 and a half student days that a school is 100% staffed
Right.
in today's climate.
Yep.
Yeah, I was happy to see that increase in absenteeism, and I looked right down at that chart to see that our fill rate
Fill
was
rate,
actually
yeah.
higher, and I go, we're doing a good job with that, and was that because of that program?
Right, it sort of changes the way you look at that data. I mean, in terms of, another one that's in there that is important is the increase to the sub pool. Like, if we know there's more subs, and we know our fill rates are going up to some degree, you have to kind of take that into account as you look at the sub needs, if the sub needs are up as dramatically as they seem to be because of absences. That's the bigger discussion here, and it's not really what is on the table for motion or for action, but it is something we,
Getting that year-end report, that's something we'll be sharing with our leadership team to deep dive why our absenteeism rates up
Okay.
for employee groups.
And Ms. Higginbotham, you said you had a couple of questions.
Yeah, and then my second question was, so do we hire the building sub, or is that somebody that the TOC sends to us as a,
great question. So when we made the commitment to move in this direction last summer, we explored that with TOC. Technically, it's a TOC employee, so their starting point is, we'll do the work, we'll get you the building sub, and our response to that, they explained, was similar to other districts, as we said, well, wait a minute, we want to have a hand in that process. We want to drive that. So it's a collaborative effort. In many cases, we're finding it's people who are familiar with the particular school, and kind of there's logic to how those people are recruited or how we bring them in, but we'd be crazy not to solicit the help of TOC to try to find people, because they'll give us updates. Hey, we have somebody interested in building sub, and they will work with our buildings to make that known.
so how does that work contractually then? Cause it's their employees, so with, we've said, yes, we're gonna have them as a building sub. If they don't work out, then is that contractually, they have to find somebody else to fill that? Are we allowed to say they're not working out here, and they have to provide us with somebody else?
Any
or-
substitute, if
Yeah,
we
it's just
don't like
as-
the quality, we let TOC know, please don't send them to Germantown
right.
School District anymore.
There's a
Sure, if, like on a day-to-day, but when you've hired them as a
Same
building
with
sub,
this.
it's
It'd
just
be
wanna
the
make sure
same
that that's
thing.
kind of
And
the
so
same.
last year, some of our principals tapped people on the shoulder that were subbing frequently and said, hey, would you like to be a building sub? You're here all the time anyways, it's more money, we think you're a good fit with our kids and our other staff, and some of those people then did become our building subs.
Yeah. I
It's just working with TOC then to say, we're recommending this person, and they have to work through TOC to get aligned with them.
Yeah, it just historically used to be very, very common for people to begin that way. And it's just not the same now for understandable reasons. But I think our takeaway at this point in time right now is, hey, we've tried this. We don't think it's in our best interest to abandon the process. We see value, even merely for the sake of office staff, in terms of that position is very, very helpful. I asked one of the office assistants who has retired from a nearby school, her perspective, and her eyes got like this, yes, we need building subs. It helps us dramatically. Those people are on the phone
Yeah,
early in the morning.
The
like-
first news they get every morning is who's not gonna be there, and then they have to navigate that with their principal, so that, you just think about the franticness of that happening. And often they'll know from frontline who's already called in, but then something happens in your home in the morning and you're stuck, so that's where the building sub, we can maneuver the first couple hours until we figure out the fit for the rest of the day.
And if we get really good at it, we'll be able to utilize, in positions where somebody isn't filled, we'll be able to utilize them elsewhere.
Great.
I think the coordination piece, from my perspective, the coordination piece is probably a lifesaver in many cases. Trying to work not only to find the fills, but also, but then keep in mind, it's then between buildings, so then they're fighting over each other. The other thing too is, to the earlier point, as far as filling time, there's always something, even if it's just for one period, 15 minutes, whatever the case is, there's probably always work to do.
Another hand on deck at recess or at
Yes,
lunch.
yeah.
And
I was
if
gonna say,
someone
can you
familiar
put them
with
in the
the
lunchroom
kids
for lunch duty and
staff,
such?
it's
Everywhere.
easier.
And then the last thing I would mention
Are
too
you
is,
speaking from personal
yeah.
experience?
Well, not personal, it's indirect personal experience. But then the last thing too is keeping in mind that we have different start times at different buildings. County Line and MacArthur, it wouldn't necessarily be that unusual for someone to start at County Line, which
Right.
is an early start, and then have to jump over to MacArthur in the afternoon. Number one, there's not really good overlap time, so it's kind of go to County Line, go to MacArthur and start, but then it's also a later day in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things.
Yep.
So, I think this is a great idea, and hopefully we can fill those positions early, because I've agreed with everything said so far.
Yeah, I like everything I've heard, Kim. Any questions? Tom,
I have a question about the report.
let's hear it.
I find it interesting that Amy Bell has very close to the same number of absences as County Line, and County Line's a bigger school. And then you have Rockfield, which is close to elementary, close to MacArthur, but
way down.
Rockfield's a much smaller school than MacArthur. I don't know, is it worth digging into that data at all?
Like I said, I think that absence data is definitely worth digging into. It's there's a lot there. I can't speak to it now, but
Yeah, I think that's what we have to dive in with
Yeah.
our principals, because you think about the demographic of age at some of the schools and how they vary too, some with young children at home. So are they absent
Yeah,
because
yeah.
children
Yeah,
are
children are
sick
sick,
versus
sure.
more veteran staff who don't have children? But that's what we have to work with and then we have the internal data in Skyward to look at specific grade levels, teams, individuals, and then there's always a story behind that with that as well. So that's something we have to work with, as Mike and I looked at this when this came in last week with our principal team.
yeah. And when we're with our principals in what,
2
few
weeks,
weeks,
yeah.
this will be a topic of discussion. I recall a different time that we worked together, having pretty much the exact same conversation, right?
Yeah.
And we'll do that. We'll replicate that kind of a process for how to navigate this.
Probably no surprise that Fridays are also a high volume day.
Hmm.
Any other questions or observations? All right, hearing none, do I have a motion?
Make a motion to move forward with a positive recommendation to the full board to approve the hiring of 6 building substitutes through Teachers on Call with a daily pay rate of $160 per day for the 2024-25 school year.
And I will second that. Any discussion? Further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
I will abstain.
That's, no opposed then, that motion will carry. That brings us to item 8. Do I have one more motion?
The motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries, and we are now adjourned at 5:26 PM, July 15th, 2024.